Hello and Happy New Year from the team from Off the Fence. Obviously, this is your go-to weekly jumps programme brought to you in association with BOYLESPORTS and of course comes to you on all the At The Races digital platforms. And we're on to episode 8, I think, of this series 4 and of course the first episode of 2024. And I am joined, as always, by Barry Geraghty and Tony Keenan to talk all things national hunt racing on both sides of the Irish Sea after what has been an incredibly hectic festive period for jump racing fans. We've got loads coming up for you in this show, obviously a look back on all the festive racing, but of course we also have some price boosts for you from BOYLESPORTS. Do read the T's and C's, I'll be reading them out as and when they come in the show, tracker time as well, and a brief look ahead to next weekend. But of course we're just in the lull after Christmas and New Year. Barry, how was your festive season at home and at work?
Yeah, good, busy. Vanessa, I had 3 days in Leopardstown, brilliant racing there. Got to watch as much of Kempton and everywhere else as I could, but no, great. It was a busy Christmas period, but no, it was, as I said, brilliant racing.
Yeah, it really was, and some, I think, above average and smart performances to look forward to. But Tony, I know you went racing to Leopardstown at least one day. Did you enjoy yourself on track there?
Ah, yeah, of course. You look, like Barry said, they're crazy busy. Just seemed to be an awful lot going on. Probably could have done with a few more abandonments maybe to leaven the thing out a little bit. But yeah, kind of coming back down a bit and had a bit of time to think about what's unfolded over Christmas, and now things, as they do, calm down a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you miss so much. Like, you come back from a day at the races and you've missed so much action elsewhere. There's a lot of catching up to do, but that's what this show is for. We're going to rattle through the best performances and hopefully cover most of the big talking points from that festive racing season. We shall kick off with the King George, Barry, which seems like an awful long time ago. Obviously, Hewick winning, what a story that was for Shark Hanlon and the team. Gavin Sheehan, man of the moment. But of course, Shishkin jumping off and then depositing Nico de Boinville on the ground at the second last. Allaho disappointing. Brave Man's Game, what to make of him. I feel like it was a wonderful race and loads of drama, but in the aftermath, I feel as though we've got more questions than answers.
Yeah, you're probably right. And Hewick was the unlikely winner. It was David and Goliath, and there was a few Goliaths from the sleigh, which was a brilliant performance. Another big winner for Gavin Sheehan, the Shark as well, likewise. So it was one to be celebrated and enjoyed. But obviously it looked very unlikely before the second last. Shishkin, who eventually he got going, and Nico had to stoke him up to get him enthusiastic, but he got racing happily. Probably pressed on plenty early down the back, and had everything under pressure and looked home for all money jumping the second last, and he just seemed to slip or lost footing on landing, and you know, he would have gone from 35 mile an hour to about 5 mile an hour. So Nico had no chance. He was fired straight up in the horse's ears and deposited out the side door. Then Brave Man's Game crashed into the back of Shishkin. Allaho seemed to get a bit lonely in front on the run to the last, and Hewick comes with a wet sail and robs all the prizes. So as I say, unlikely, but if it had played out with Shishkin making a clear round, he was the likely winner. I think Brave Man's Game was probably more affected by Shishkin than Allaho, so I think Brave Man's Game was going to run on to be second. Maybe Hewick would have been third at that stage, but it didn't work out that way. So Shishkin, that leaves him. Where do you go with him? Gold Cup or not? And maybe he will, but he's not proven to get it, but you'd have to be impressed with his performance. Brave Man's Game, I questioned his prep going into this. He looked more like a Gold Cup horse this year than he did when he won the King George last year. He seemed to have more pace last year, whether that's on the back of his prep for the race this year, or maybe he's just getting a bit slower. So I'd say he's probably worth taking note of in the Gold Cup market. He's going to be trained straight for the race. He ran well in it last year, obviously. So there's plenty to take out of it. I think Hewick will do well to take all those scalps again the next time.
Yeah, I think that's the general consensus, but a muddled race, all right, Tony. Hewick's 16-1 with BOYLESPORTS for the Gold Cup, but Shishkin is 12s. Are you as adamant as Barry that he was home and hosed when the fall happened?
Yeah, I would think he was. I think he stayed on well at the entry there. last spring when he kind of had made hard work of getting to a high senior. He kept on well from there. I'd agree with what Barry said there. Say Hewick might have been the third or fourth best horse in the day. Very hard to win races with the way he got behind, but he was able to do it with kind of the pace they went, or what happened up in front. I suppose one of my thoughts afterwards, like, Allaho just doesn't look to be quite what he was. Now maybe his so what was it, he finished second or third, close second or close third, is going to be good enough going back to the Ryanair. But I think now kind of, what is he, around 9-4, 5-2 type of price, something maybe with a bit younger legs might be able to get the better of him. I was also reading the Thompson man's comments there today about him. He sounded very, very lukewarm, and I'm kind of satisfactory. You get the feeling that the spark that he had in those couple of Ryanair successes, and maybe more especially that brilliant Punchestown Gold Cup win, just might not be there. I do think he kind of got the race handed to him on a plate, with what happened to Shishkin and Braveman Skin getting hampered and couldn't kind of capitalise. So look, I'd say he looks skinny enough now for his next engagement.
Interesting, his best days may be behind him. Time catches up with all of us, as the saying goes. Tony, I want to stick with you for Galopin Des Champs. We will switch over to Ireland and tackle the Savills chase at Leopardstown. Galopin Des Champs taking on Jeriko, the matchup we really wanted to see. Obviously, a couple of high-profile deflections with Fast or Slow not running, but hopefully we'll see him at the Dublin Racing Festival. But in terms of this performance, this was Galopin right back to his very best, wasn't it? It's like a home game for him around Leopardstown, and he really went and put on a bit of a show for us, I felt.
Yeah, it may be even better than we've ever seen him before. I see the Racing Post ratings given the same figure for this as the Gold Cup in time form, actually given £2 better. It was an absolutely sensational performance, especially the fact that he made all of those 23 lengths kind of from the turn in, really fast kind of finishing kick from him for a stay and chaser. And if he turns up in the Gold Cup in this type of form, there's nothing going to beat him, really. Most people were saying, a lot of people saying afterwards, the best performance I've seen in the stay and chase at Leopardstown maybe ever. And I actually look back, like the Leopardstown 3 mile open chases, they do tend to be kind of tight fought races, a lot of close finishes over the years. Like the only kind of comparison I think went back to Exotic Dancer winning what was the Lexus, now the Savills by 20 lengths. I think that was back in 2005. But Galopin even more impressive than that. Now, I do have a few kind of caveats about his performance, maybe more so with a view to Cheltenham. I say if he turns up in that form, I do think the Gold Cup is probably over. I don't think anything else has the ceiling that he has shown in those couple of wins. But I do think there was a fairly strong inside-outside bias on the chase track at Leopardstown over the last 3 days after it rained. I think there were 7 chases over those 3 days, and 6 of those races the horse on the kind of that raced on the outer one. The exception was Factor File, which probably wasn't the most competitive race. I think Paul Town and especially and basically an awful lot of the Willie Mullins trained horses wanted to be out there, and they were very kind of wise to that, better ground been out there. So maybe he's flattered kind of in that sense of it. The other thing that I have in my head is I do think maybe he's a little bit better at Leopardstown than Cheltenham, or at least his jumping seems to be a little bit better at Leopardstown than it is at Cheltenham. His jumping at Leopardstown has always been super slick, whereas at Cheltenham, the year in the Turners, his last fence thing was a little bit of an aberration, but he had made mistakes up to that point, and I thought he made a number of kind of niggly mistakes in the Gold Cup last year, and it was good enough to get away with that. This has also kind of been a change in tactics. I think Willie Mullins was saying that, you know, Paul Townend had lobbied maybe to ride him more forward, which would have been a very much different approach to what they've been doing throughout kind of his second season over fences. They want to settle him in, make sure he was going to stay at the Gold Cup trip. Now, is he going to have to go forward, or, you know, will you disappoint him if he doesn't go forward? Gold Cup can be a very different race to maybe some of those Leopardstown races. A few English horses, maybe outsiders, might want to kind of go out in their shield, take him on a bit early. So it'll be interesting how that plays out. But kind of most of all, I'm most concerned about is that this was just a massive peak effort in a race that they weren't planning for him at the start of the season. I think it was always going to be John Durkin onto DRF onto Cheltenham. They were a little bit disappointed with him in the John Durkin, so they said, look, we'll bring him back for this, changed a few things, and he's gone and put up this performance. The last time he peaked in the Cheltenham Gold Cup, it probably took him 2 races to overcome that, his 2 subsequent runs at Punchestown, before coming back for this last week. So I would have a little bit of question whether he'd be quite at his peak in Cheltenham. But it is Willie Mullins you're talking about. There's every chance he will kind of get him back to that level. But a couple of little things there would be kind of niggling me. Just will he be able to reproduce this again in 2.5 months?
Okay, a couple of little caveats we'll have them at. But essentially, a class performance, but Tony wouldn't be doing his job unless he flagged up the things that were just niggling him at the back of his mind, Barry. And he mentions there that finishing kick sort of from as they came into the home stretch. And I was there on track, and it's rare that, when you're watching on track, you really say, wow, because obviously in the moment you don't have the best view compared to the TV screens. You obviously have the atmosphere, etc. But in that moment, it felt really like, wow, that was a class performance. Do you think Jeriko in second underperformed? / how disappointed will that team be with that performance? Or did they just bump into, as Tony said, one of the best staying chasing open performances in recent times at that track?
I think, but they ran into one of the best performances, definitely, and it was like what we saw at the festival in Cheltenham last year. But Conflated dictated the pace for a good bit of the early part, and the tempo only raised as they went away from the stand. So they probably went about a mile and 3 of the 3 mile one or so. Added to me a controlled pace. At that point, Jeriko was shoved up close to the top gear, and for me, he just, instead of getting a consistent end-to-end gallop, I think he was in top gear for too long through the middle part of the race and didn't see it out. He was a length up and Conflated when Conflated exited at the last, and he beat him a length down Ryle. So I don't think Jeriko underperformed, but I don't think the race was ran to suit him, and I think he could have been closer to Galopin Des Champs, but maybe not within a dozen lengths of him. And I'd see that being the case as well at the festival. And Tony makes a good point as regards them peaking him, and you'd have to trust in Willie that he will get him back. But I suppose it would stand to him is that he is a year older. He's an 8-year-old now, where he was a 7-year-old in the Gold Cup last year, so he should be able to take it a little bit better this season than he did last year, but you'd have to be blown away by the performance. And fast or slow is obviously still a danger to him, and I see he's an entry in the 2 mile chase at the Dublin Racing Festival as an option. So it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. And Martin Brasden has been very clever about who he's planned him all the way through his career to date, so he's definitely of plenty of interest.
Well, it was for whatever reason, it was a clever move to sidestep Galopin over the Christmas period anyway, given the performance he put in on that ground at that track. I should just flag up that this is the first of our price boost, guys. So Galopin Des Champs is actually 11 to 10 for the Cheltenham Gold Cup, having got back on track here with this wild performance. For what it's worth, Fast or Slow is next best in the market at 9 to 2 with BOYLESPORTS. But your price boost is actually a double. So your price boost is Gaelic Warrior to win the Turner's Novices Chase and Galopin Des Champs to win the Gold Cup. That in a win double was 16 to 5 and is now boosted to 4 to 1. So if you would like to avail of that, please do read the T's and C's. It's available for a limited time only, and it's £100 max bet. But that is all in the T's and C's, which you must read. Go and avail of it though on the BOYLESPORTS website. We have a couple more price boosts coming away, so stay tuned for that. Right, let's move on to a pretty impressive novice chase division. I just feel like this class of novice chasers, Barry, essentially seems above average this year in England and Ireland, but also in France, given what we saw Il Français do in the Courto Star over from France to Kempton. And he puts in this performance on Boxing Day that was amid the sort of madness of King George, and then, of course, Constitution Hill. It was an incredible, hour and a half of sport, really. But this performance itself, everyone's blown away by it because he's so impressive to look at and to watch. It takes your breath away the way in which he goes about his jumping.
He does, and Kempton is such a flat track, and it suits a pace horse who goes forward and attacks his fences, and this fella really did. He jumped brilliantly all the way. Couple of untidy mistakes, but he's entitled to do that at the pace he goes. But your typical French style, he attacks his fence, he charges, he flies them, with a strong pace. got a breather into him before leaving the back straight, and you were just wondering what was in the locker. And next thing, he quickens away again up the straight, and he beats Hermes Allen, I think about 11 lengths, and beats him comfortably. And he's a good yardstick. He's winner of a Grade 2 in his previous start in Newbury, and he completely dismissed him. But it doesn't look like we're going to have the pleasure of him at Cheltenham. I believe he's going to wait for the French Gold Cup and come back for a crack at the King George next year.
Yeah, but it'll be something to so look forward to. Any comparisons of horses you rode that really attack their fences the way in which he does? I mean, he really accelerates into his fences, it seems.
Yeah, I would have ridden plenty of hell races over the years, but I can't say one at that level who raced that way. But he's an impressive horse and a big raw horse. He's gonna improve for time as well. So you'll get a more furnished version, I would imagine, next Christmas in Campden.
If you're James Reevely, are you getting like a real positive buzz out of that, or are you right on the edge of absolutely bricking it too?
No, I'd say he's good. I'd say he measured well. I'd say he made a couple of novice mistakes, but they were only small mistakes. He would have learned from that. No, he's a fella you could trust, I'd say. And a fine big horse with lots of scope. So no, he'd even suit a married man at this stage, Vanessa.
Like it. Right, Tony, let's move on to another, I think definitely not as well, but another pretty impressive novice chase performance. We got to see Nationale, of course, the supreme winner from last year, make his somewhat belated chasing debut at Leopardstown, but this impressed many people. Was it pretty much faultless in your eyes, Tony?
Yeah, I think so. And to be fair to the horse, most of his career has been faultless to this point. Change of tactics from what he had done over hurdles, where he's kind of ridden with a bit more strength and would take a lead here. He went on, his jumping was excellent. He went a very strong pace, and their time compared very well with the later Grade 1 won by Dino Blue. The horse that raced up with him finished beating a long way. It was just an excellent performance. You'd be very reluctant to oppose him for the Arkle. I suppose the only surprise it was in maybe the run up to the race when he was declared with a tongue tie, and I suppose we could infer that he'd had a breathing operation, which Barry Connell confirmed kind of either just before the race or afterwards. And it would be nice if we could just get this stuff declared in Ireland rather than having to guess. At least over in Britain they do have that in the race cards and in the kind of form databases, so maybe something to be looking at.
Yeah, since that came in, I find that's a real positive. It stops you guessing exactly that, Tony. What about you, Barry, with Nationale? Tony says he's tricky to oppose and his price reflects that. He's even money for the Arkle. Any concerns about him going to the festival at all at this stage? I mean, he seems bulletproof.
Yeah, no, I was very positive on him as well. Good winner of the Supreme, obviously, last year. I wasn't sure how he would make the step into chasing. He was a slick hurdler, but he jumped his fences really well. Lots of scope, very accurate. Loved how he travelled through the race. But the one thing for me that stood out more than anything was how he was ridden, as Tony said, positively, but on soft ground. You got the impression last season that they were very protective of him. They were worried about soft ground. They were worried about it in the Supreme. He rode him that way. He delayed his challenge, gave him a beautiful ride, where there was no such issue at Leopardstown. They were happy just to roll with him, and he just seemed a more robust horse, physically more impressive. I just thought, yeah, I'm really excited about him now, and his jumping was electric. So no, I'd be with Tony. I think he's the right favourite in the Arkle. Okay, so he's getting big ticks from both the boys then. Barry is Facile, who won the beginners chase, the Rising Stars beginners chase, following some pretty high profile horses that have won that race before him. Over the 2 miles 5 furlongs for Team Mullins, and of course the McManus Silks, Mark Walsh in the saddle. A big step forward from what he did on his chasing debut. Lots of people very excited about this horse, including the trainer himself, who's come out with some very positive quotes in regards to him. Are you on the bandwagon with Facile as well? Yeah, very much so. I watched the video, was point to point early in the season, and he was electric there as well. I thought it was a brilliant performance, like Nationale, just devastating, like destroyed the opposition, jumped brilliantly, travelled strongly, just looked like a class act. And for Willie to talk him up and said this fella could go all the way to the top, he doesn't mean the top of a high rated handicap, he's thinking all the way. So he sees him as a Gold Cup contender, so he's obviously getting the right signs at home. But for me to go out in Leopardstown, big track as well, and like that as well, which is a positive from National, to do it on a big track like Leopardstown isn't easy in your first number of fences. So both of those are really, really impressive to me.
Tony, I feel like it's not that often we hear Willie Mullins come out with those sort of lines. Obviously, lots of people have latched onto that quote about him going to the very top, but he won't have said that lightly.
Yeah, he might be trying to kind of back up what he's done with the horse a little bit. Like he avoided novice hurdle, so he kind of has to justify himself. He maybe has got Facile Vega a bit wrong now with the kind of very bullish talk, but I don't think he's got this horse wrong. I would agree with an awful lot of what Barry has said there. I do like the way that he was the only chase winner to go around the inside there in those last 3 days, and still was visually very, very impressive. Loved the way he just went clear of the field, like for minimal effort from Mark Walsh. I think was kind of between 4 and 3 out, and his time was excellent. So yeah, he looks destined for high rank. But again, this is all very much reflected in kind of the markets and stuff like that. I presume he's going to come back for the 2-5 race here at the DRF. Or maybe he could be taking on Gaelic Warrior if they're inclined to have a go with him left-handed, as they were at the meeting last year.
Yeah, well, let's tackle that then. In terms of Factifar's prices, he's 6-1 for the Brown Advisory, and he's 10-1 for the National Hunt Chase, obviously quoted for the longer trip. But you would hope and think that the mid-div trip will be where we see him at for the majority of this season. And Tony, you've there mentioned Gaelic Warrior, so let's switch over to him, because of course he skipped around Limerick in what looked like pretty horrendous ground, but made very light work of that under Patrick. Following on from what we saw him do on his chasing debut, he's a class jumper to watch. But of course, this race, the Faheen Novices Chase, really sort of overshadowed about the sort of incident between Danny and Patrick Mullins, and then the argument after the line, and then the interview, of course. So I feel like the actual performance of Gaelic Warrior slightly got lost, and it was one of high class. It shouldn't get lost.
Yeah, and again, another kind of boring here maybe, but another excellent kind of performance. A little bit more restrained than he was at Punchestown. Patrick Mullins didn't get taken off with him. He was able to get a breather into him, kind of coming down the hill. His jump was very good, albeit to the right, and just cleared away then at the end. I do think though that kind of Willie Mullins might have left the Grade 1 at Leopardstown on the first day at home running. He let it Tom's here. I think he might have been able to win that race, kind of running Facile Vega there ahead of him, not going kind of with another backup plan along with Charge. I'm not sure that the 2.5 round Limerick on really testing ground suited that horse, and he ran pretty well in light of it. As for the stuff afterwards, I think Paddy Mullins just made a little bit of a brat of himself here, but sure, look, it is what it is. Like if you kind of, if you can't fall out with your family, he was saying, who can you kind of fall out with, and stuff like that. Look, people say things to their family that never say to other people, and that's kind of the way it is. He'd have been as well pushing away the microphone and not writing that piece in the Racing Post afterwards. But sure, look, it is what it is. It will be interesting to see though if there is any fallout from the stewards looking at his kind of comments in the interview, because Sam Ewing got a ban for this ride on Gordon Elliott's horse, Dudery's horse in the Morgiana hurdle for something that seemed quite marginal, but if you depending on what way you were looking at it. So is there going to be kind of a penalty off the back of this? I'd say there might be a fair chance if they've set the kind of precedent from Punchestown a few weeks ago.
I mean, can I just ask you, Tony? You're a punter. You punt. You have a bet. I know that you look at form. I'm guessing you're the sort of punter that doesn't take a huge amount in off the back of interviews and what these sort of people say in interviews. But from your punting point of view, with Paddy saying his line about I told him not to go for the gap, were you disappointed, surprised, shocked? Like, what was your reaction to hearing that bit of insight? Because we know the conversations go on, but it's rare we hear it in a public domain like that.
I actually do. I would listen to interviews as many as I kind of can, and I do think that they're often
sorry, that was a bad assumption. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's a perfect reasonable point of view, but I think they can be very interesting. Look, Paddy Mullins was probably like the football player that got a slap 5 minutes before the end, and when the microphone was stuck in his face afterwards, he said something he kind of shouldn't have said. We can all say something in the heat of the moment. It's maybe writing a piece 2 or 3 days later, and it might be just as well advised. Look, as the race went, Danny Mullins went as hard as he could to kind of win it going down the inner. like there was nothing that felt wrong about the race in kind of that sense. Now, as I say, it'll be up to the stewards to kind of follow up with the comments on what they're going to do with that. Like I do feel like, look, there's obviously plenty of tactical stuff going on there, but hopefully never to the point where you'd be trying to you know, what we say, set up the race ideally for certain horses, and kind of denying others maybe a winning chance in the process.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. Barry, can you, as a, you know, obviously a jockey, see both sides of the coin here, or is one of them in the right and one of them in the wrong, whether it be the ride or the reaction afterwards?
I'd say Patrick's probably, he's in the wrong on both counts. You know, he turned into the straight, he left room on the inside for Danny. But Patrick was on the best horse. If Patrick just said, right, I'm going to go win my race now, he got all the breathers he needed. You know, he slowed the pace right up coming down the hill. He stacked them up even if you want to turn in. Danny didn't have an option to go outside of Gaelic Warrior because Keith Donoghue was there in American Mike, so he only had the option to go in. But at that point, Patrick should have just let his horse roll, go and win your race, let him off, and he would have just pulled away from the field. Danny could have lined up down the inner, but he'd been 2 lengths behind him. There wouldn't have been an issue. So I think Patrick, he overemphasised his breeder, and to be honest, he took the mick on it a bit because he had to go and win his race and let Danny do his own thing. The horse was very good, as Tony mentioned, jumped a little bit right. I think that will affect him when he goes left-handed over a fence. It generally is more exaggerated for a chaser if you jump a certain way, because there's more contact on the reins with the jockey. It creates the horse then leans more in your hands, and he will or she will go to its left or go to its right, whichever is the preferred side, but more so over fences because there's more contact on the reins that are approached than there is over hurdles, where you let a horse in and just flick a hurdle. You don't necessarily interfere as much, so I'd be a bit worried about him going left-handed. I thought his jumping was brilliant, and a great performance, but I'd be concerned about that. But Patrick did after the line, you know, he flipped the lead, he lost it with Danny. You couldn't, you know, compliment him for it, but it can happen to anyone, I suppose. It was heat of the moment. I'm not sure there's a rule that he can be brought in for that. Whether it's anything he brought in about his words in the interview after this, I'm not sure, but we're going to have to just watch this space and see what comes of it.
Intriguing and interesting in regards to the horse. Never mind the boys, but the horse going left-handed. He is a even money shot for the Turner's Novices Chase at the festival, and of course he is in that price boost double with Galopin Des Champs. Let's move on to our next price boost, which is in regards to Grangeclare West, who for the Brown Advisory has been boosted to 9-2 from 7-2 at the top of that market, off the back of what he did in the Neville Hotel Novices Chase. Tony, I will start with you here. You know I'm a fan of Corbett's Cross and I want to make excuses for him, but am I barking up the wrong tree there?
Well, barking might be appropriate with that horse, what he did in Cheltenham last year, but anyway, look, he's just not a natural chaser, is he? He was a little bit better in the middle run at Fairyhouse, but this race here, he kind of puts himself behind in a bit of bother. Now, the way he made up his ground very, very smoothly and all that, but I don't know, just his fence is really his thing. Would they think about coming back over hurdles? Look, Noble Yates couldn't jump at all early on in his career, and see what they did with him, but at the moment he just wouldn't convince me. Grangeclare West took the same outside route as a lot of the Paul Townend rides over the few days. Visually very impressive, took a bit of a tug going through it, but his jumping is excellent. Like, he kind of fell asunder last year after his maiden hurdle, did eventually get back to form, but this season he stacked 2 really good wins back to back. They might be tempted to just leave him off now to Cheltenham with a little bit of fragility he showed kind of last season, but again, this was very good. Florian Porter was much more tractable going back left-handed, looked much more straightforward. He was probably disadvantaged a little bit by going down the inside. I think they'll be as well kicking on to Navan and Nason, trying to win a couple of those grade 2s that are coming up in January and February time there. I thought Favori de Chandu was the complete opposite. I think he just hated going left-handed. His head carriage was just holding it to the right the whole way, jumping right the whole way. There's a reason why he's only once run left-handed before this. So yeah, the winner very visually impressive, but I do think you can pick holes in the performance of the other 3 main fancied horses.
Okay, interesting. I think, Barry, because of Grangeclare West's season hurdling last year, as Tony's touched upon, I mean, look, he's not under the radar by any stretch of the imagination. He is 9-2 at the top of the market, or price boosted to 9-2 for the Brown Advisory. So I understand now he's not in any way under the radar. But go back 2 weeks, and I feel like, you know, he wasn't really a talking horse until this race, basically. Is that fair to say, because of his profile over the last, well, sort of early part of his career?
Yeah, definitely. And the vibes, there was no major vibes about him from the Mullins camp. So all the talk was Corbett's Cross. And I would agree with Tony to a degree. I thought he jumped better in Fairyhouse. It looked a Labour performance in Leopardstown. So I'm not just sure we saw the best of him. So I'd give him another chance. I loved how he jumped through the second part in Nace on his first run, and I loved how he jumped at Fairyhouse and the way he won. So I just wouldn't rip me ticket up at him just yet. I'd say he could do okay. As regards the winner, very impressive. Jumped brilliantly, lots of scope, travelled strongly, but all of his form is on soft ground. His only run on better than soft ground was behind Goodland, when he was 21 lengths behind Goodland in the Dublin Racing Festival last year on yielding ground. So is he ground dependent? Maybe so. He's a big horse. He's a heavy set horse. He definitely enjoys soft ground. I wonder would he cope with better ground in the spring. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But you'd have to be impressed with the performance. But I would probably agree with Tony to a degree that you'd have to question the second, third and fourth. Did they run to their best in behind?
Okay, Barry and me have a forgiving nature when it comes to Corbett's Cross. He's going to be the cliff horse, Barry, for us in this series. I can tell already. Barry, I will stick with you, because are you a forgiving nature when it comes to Facile Vega? Obviously, it didn't all go Willie Mullins' way in the novice chase department over the Christmas period, because he started off with a bit of a flop in regards to Facile Vega. Obviously, well beaten by Founder 50 in the Grade 1 Racing Post Novices Chase at Leopardstown. The winner dropping back in trip looked to suit him, but again, I feel like it's slightly muddled race and a lot of focus in and around why Facile Vega got beaten. Can you shine any light on that?
Yeah, but you know, I'd say he just didn't turn up. Like, you can make excuses for horses, but he finished behind everything. He finished behind My Met Mozzie and Sharjah as well. You know, you would never have dreamt that going out in the race. He was very impressive in Navan. He looked like he was going to improve a lot from the run in Navan, which a lot of Willies were at the time. You could argue maybe he wants softer ground, maybe he needs to make the running. But being honest, the Facile Vega we've seen for the last 2 seasons wouldn't have had a problem with any of those issues during Christmas at Leopardstown. So I don't think he turned up. I'd have to give him another chance as well. Obviously the winner was jumping to his right, and that wasn't helping Facile Vega, but that was inconvenience and found a 50 as well. So he probably overcame more and still won. I wouldn't be getting excited about him. It was a good performance. It was a nice race for him to win. Can he back it up in better company? I'm not so sure. But I'd be Facile Vega. I'd be definitely watching him the next day with interest, but I'd be hoping for a lot better.
Okay, what would you like to say in reaction to that, Tony? Are you in agreement that we're sort of giving Facile Vega a bit of a pass here? He just didn't show up, or do you think there's more legit excuses on the day?
I think Barry summed it up quite well there. I'd say Paddy Mullins didn't have much peace at all with what was going on with Founder 50. If he should have bumped him at the first, and then they could have lots of shifting this way and shifting that. His 2 disappointments to me have coincided with kind of the fastest ground that he's met over obstacles. I know he won the Punchestown Champion bumper on quite decent ground, but DRF race last year and this just, look, Willie Mullins got him back once before in the Supreme and able to win a Punchestown, but I just think he just checked out completely kind of on the run to the last. He was still travelling best at that point. His head just went in the air, and jockey just said he wasn't going to give him a hard time, which is fair enough. But yeah, it is. I think it is kind of a little bit ground related. Maybe they'll think about going up and trip with him. Obviously his dam finished up in a 3 mile grade 1 mare, so that might be worth a go, but still his jumping wouldn't totally convince me. I thought it was just okay at Navan, definitely not a real 2 milers jumper compared to something how maybe Marine Nationale would jump or how Gaelic Warrior would jump. It wouldn't be sharp enough for 2 miles, so maybe to try and get him up and trip someone, hope for a bit of soft ground.
Okay, interesting. For what it's worth, he's 9-1 with BOYLESPORTS. Facile Vega is 9-1 with BOYLESPORTS for the Arkle, and Founder 50, the winner, is 10-1 with BOYLESPORTS. But of course, that Marine Nationale performance right at the top of the betting, even money favourite for the Arkle. Barry, let's move on and talk about the 2 mile hurdling division. Constitution Hill skips out round Kempton, has a lovely time, puts on a real show for us, wins the Christmas hurdle again. Everyone's delighted. Obviously, an extremely short price for the champion hurdle itself to win that race again. But what a joy it was to see him finally. And, he looks to be even more in love with his game than ever before. He just looks to be having the best time ever, this horse.
Yeah, definitely. So they slotted him in and took a lead. They were, forced to make the run and say in the fighting fifth at the start of last season, and that kind of led them through the season, and he was ridden wide, if you like, in the champion hurdle and kept out of trouble. And he probably had a lot of daylight and a lot to think of and a lot to look at. He seemed far more professional when he was tucked in, taking a lead. But he's also grown up a little bit too. So he's pushing on now. He's getting the 6 turning 7, I think, is he? So he's going to grow up and get a bit smarter. But he seemed very professional, very measured. The speed he showed down over the second last and measured the last really well. There was no chance like he took in Cheltenham or the fighting fifth or anywhere. He took a few liberties last season that had you on the edge of your seat, but thankfully there was none of those moments. So it was easy viewing in comparison to Cheltenham last season anyway. So, but brilliant performance, and it was just good to see him as professional as it was, and taking just focus on what he's doing, I suppose.
But you say about, just the last point on him, just to pick up on what he did over the last 2 hurdles at Kempton, I think because it was highlighted by the sort of camera and the tracker camera, and you're able to see it up close with those, just the way it's sort of set out there. But, the way in which he accelerates into his fence with so much gusto and that real pinpoint accuracy. Can you just put into words kind of how rarefied that is because he's just got that naturally. Nobody's trained that into him, have they?
Well, we did here at home. Me and the kids were schooling for ages, Vanessa. No, he has. He jumps really well, so he's a natural to jump. But he's been really well schooled in 7 barras. There's never, there's no corner cut in the schooling department. But then he's got natural pace as well. So he can just run at a hurdle at his speed. And he's nice and relaxed. He can adjust his stride, measure, bang, and he's just like lightning. So it's a combination of everything. So he's a natural jumper. He's got a good brain that he's not rushing or panicking, but he's got the speed then to extend if he needs to extend. But he can just back off and adjust as well. So he's just got it. He's got it all, really, I suppose.
He has a unique natural combo which finds him as a bit of a one-off, really, and the market suggests that for the champion hurdle with BOYLESPORTS he is 1-3 favourite, and Statement of course is next best at 4-1 with BOYLESPORTS off the back of the Matheson hurdle win. Tony winning that race again, a 7th Grade 1, and he just remains this horse that because of Constitution Hill he doesn't really get talked about that much, really, but it's hard to see how he'd be able to turn the tables with Constitution Hill given what we've seen from both of them.
It is. This actually might have been his best performance of all so far. Certainly the most meaningful non-Constitution Hill rival he's probably faced. In Paris, things maybe didn't go ideally for him. He was a bit slow at the first one down the back, and he wasn't great 2 out. But Statement just always seemed to have his measure, and as soon as Townend went from he was kind of away and gone. Presume he's going to pitch up at the Irish Champion Hurdle at the Dublin Racing Festival, win that again, maybe back to Punchestown. Willie Mullins was maybe mentioned that really soft ground in Cheltenham, might be his job, might be his absolute optimum conditions. But look, it's highly unlikely he's going to be beating Constitution Hill unless something goes badly wrong with that one.
And fingers crossed that doesn't happen, of course. Barry, let's move on to the staying hurdling division, which of course is always a little bit chaotic, I think it's fair to say. And we didn't get a huge amount of clarity really in this division over the Christmas period, but we did see, Bob Ollinger over 2.5 miles in the Rel Keel, but it looks like he won't be stepping up in trip. But we saw Crambo in the long walk hurdle. Over those 2 performances over here in the UK were kind of eye-catching. Both of them, Crambo is now 8-1 for the Stayers hurdle, and Tiupu is up at the top of that market at 4-1. We will get to Irish Point, his stablemate, in due course. But in terms of what Crambo did in the long walk, to start with, Barry, worthy Stayers hurdle candidate?
I think worthy candidate has to be on the back of that win, But Dash and Drasher set a controlled pace, which I think suited himself, rather than just be a trailblazer and being there to, you know, sit and duck late on and be caught by everything. He controlled the pace well. I think that probably played to Crambo's strengths, because his main opposition were Champ and Paisley Park, and ideally they'd want an end-to-end gallop. So I'd say the pace suited Crambo and probably improved his chances then, or for that. So good performance, great success for Fergal O'Brien. But for a horse to get beaten in a handicap of 139 on his previous start, to be now rated 161 after winning the Long Walk Hurdle, it's a big improvement from before. Haydock, maybe a little bit unlucky in Haydock, but could you be £16 unlucky in Haydock? So I'm not just fully sure about the strength of it. Worthy to be recognised at the head of the market on the back of that win, but I think we'll meet stronger opposition.
Yes, mainly, well, Tiupu being the standout, but obviously he's doing the dreaded straight to the festival route, Tony, whereas his stablemate came out and won the Jack de Bromhead Christmas Hurdle, Irish Point, obviously in the same colours. And is that going to cause an issue further down the line? Because will these two actually meet? I was very taken with Irish Point's performance, but the focus for further down the line seems very much around Tiupu. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that seems to be the situation based on what the owner is saying. Irish Point might be kept a little bit busy, or he had plenty of racing there last season. I think he had 6 starts last season, whereas Tupa seems to be one that would prefer to be kept fresh. Visually, this was just an excellent performance. You'd love how he settled, and you'd love how he kind of quickly settled the race kind of at the turning. I do think it's kind of highly questionable form. It was a very steadily run race. Maybe if you get into a kind of a war of attrition, 3 mile hurdle race like last year's Steers Hurdle was, it may be a different story. Horse I kind of backed home by the Lee. I don't know what to make of him after this. Does he need a lead to get him going, or has he just gone into a little bit of a monkey? Like, he is a kind of a horse to come back from chase, and he just didn't really seem to fancy it. The Steering for Long just kind of better going the other way around. You could tell how slow they went by the fact that Ballyadam was kind of still on the bridle, turning in, and Paul Gilligan's horse didn't really show anything like the form he'd been showing kind of earlier on in the late autumn, kind of early winter. But you can't knock Irish Point on kind of the visuals that he's shown. Tupu would be the horse I would like for the Steers Hurdle, but the only thing is that would be totally and utterly ground dependent. It really would have to be at minimum soft to consider him for that race. But I think ability wise, he has to be at the top of the list. But as I say, it's just going to have to be on weather watch in the days before that contest.
Interesting weather watch it will be. Right, let's move on to the novice hurdlers, guys, and we could be here all night rattling through a few of these names, and we don't have that time on this show, so don't shout at me, listeners and viewers out there. I'm given orders from above. So instead, Tony, I'm going to ask you about what your best novice hurdling performance was over the Christmas period. Obviously, we saw Captain Teague win the Challow over here, and Jeriko Du Reponet win impressively at Newbury as well. They're market movers. Jeriko for the Supreme. Ballyburn impressed plenty of people at Leopardstown. And Tony, he is our next and final price boost, because he was 7-2 for the Ballymore Novices Hurdle, and he is now 9-2. Would you have any interest in that price, or does something else impress you elsewhere?
Wouldn't be rushing you over now to back him, although he was impressive. His jumping could do a little bit of sharpening up. I think he made a couple of mistakes there, but the way he went away from the rest of them now, turning in, was very impressive. This is Ballyburn now I'm talking about. Caldwell Potter was the one that won the Grade 1 on the 27th, the future champions. 9 runners in that, I'd say 2 of them probably handled the ground really. The other, I think, what were the 5 finishers? The third was the guts of 20-30 lengths off the back of the second. I'd say Daddy Longlegs, the kind of ride that he got suggested to me that the kind of were strongly of the view he wouldn't handle the ground, and he was never travelling, never jumping, and kind of Paul Townend pulled up fairly quickly. So I'd say he didn't have a hard race, and might see a different horse entirely, just on maybe more normal soft yielding to soft ground. Caldwell Potter would be the kind of horse now, if you got a Somerville Boy type Supreme was really testing ground, he'd have a massive chance. It remains to be seen what he's going to be like on a bit quicker ground, but he's certainly going the right way. Of the maiden hurdlers, the one that impressed me was the one that won the first race on the St Stephen's Day. No flies on him. JP McManus owned, and Trimby Eddie O'Grady. Visually very good. I thought he coped well with coming back to 2 miles on kind of quite decent ground, despite coming kind of from a point background. His form worked out. I think hadn't he beaten the horse that won the entry grade 1, he was a little bit fortunate. Probably should mention Farron Glory as well here. But just even the field things to me were kind of very positive. Like, you don't see too many JP McManus horses just ridden from the front, and you know, he did that. He settled well, he jumped well, just did everything right. So yeah, he'll have to kind of nearly be going the graded, probably even grade 1 route for his next start. Now maybe he lacked the kind of sharpness maybe of the kind of bumper horses, and he's more of a long term kind of a chase prospect. But I was very taken with his effort.
Okay, he gets a little positive markup from Tony. Barry, same question to you. Of any that we haven't yet already mentioned, was there anyone else you wanted to throw in the mix before we move on to the juveniles?
Yeah, I thought Jay Geraghty put in a good performance in the maiden, only his second start, so he's going to improve the experience. Beat the Butcher's Hollow, beat him well, who's probably not a bad yardstick, but definitely one for your notebook if you like. And of the two you mentioned, Jeriko Du Reponet put in a good performance in Newbury. A steadily enough run race, and he looked like a horse to me who probably wanted 2.5 mile on his previous start, but he showed good pace here. The price is probably on the skinny side for him for the Supreme, but it was still a very good performance, and a smarter, sharper performance than I would have expected on the back of his previous run. And then you had Captain T, who was probably, you could say, the opposite. Harry Cobden said, Paul Nichols said he wanted with the front to the back of the second last. Harry said he'd rather have waited a little bit longer. And you could see Captain T was pulling up in front from the last of the line. So there's probably more under the bonnet there. It was a good performance by him to win. But to me, he'd shaped more like an Albert Bartlett horse than a Ballymore at this stage. But you'd have to be happy to see him back on a winning trend again.
Yeah. I would concur with those thoughts in regards to Captain T. Jericho being 4-1 top of the Supreme market. I just feel like they love to latch onto one for the Supreme, and I don't know, I haven't bought into the hype just quite yet. But anyway, Tony, juveniles next, please. Again, some good performances over here in the UK. We had in Chepstow the finale hurdle. Salva won that for the Gary Moore yards. Good, very good festive period for them. And we also had Sir Gino down at Kempton. But what caught your eye specifically, I suppose, with you then, the focus in Ireland?
Yeah, well, Willie Mullins had, I suppose, 3 well-fancied horses in maiden hurdles. Ethical Diamond, who went for probably the most high-profile race at Leopardstown, it didn't perform, but the other 2, Bunting and Stormheart, both won. Bunting won well. I just wondered the fact that he went to Limerick, would the trainer have in mind that he might want really soft ground to show his best? Stormheart to me was more impressive at Punchestown, but again this is very much reflecting the Triumph Hurdle market. The way he cleared away from them from the turning was really impressive, and that race would have a history of throwing up good horses. Vauban got beaten in it, but even going back, good horses like Unaccompanied would have won it. That said, I had a couple of this is very small bets in the Triumph Hurdle market there just since Christmas. I think maybe the graded form has been a little bit underrated. And I think both Calaconte and Nürburgring, both around kind of 16-1 for that race, are interesting and probably a little bit overpriced. They fought out to finish a really strongly run race now at Fairyhouse at the Hatton's Grace meeting. Like, I think it was 18 lengths back to the third there. Much faster time than the Royal Bond kind of on the same card. And they'll go back to Leopardstown and kind of on better ground, a much more steadily run race, and they both still run the races. I know the Willie Mullins horse finished second there, and she and herself maybe is interesting, but I just like Calaconte. I heard actually before the race that there was Jack Kennedy had a very difficult choice between herself and Mighty Bandit. Like all the market in the run up the race would have said Mighty Bandit was the clear first string, but on the show and in the morning market, Calaconte became an awful lot closer to him. She travelled really well. She's in the right position. I think she was always holding the second on the way to the lane. Nürburgring didn't really have the run of the race, kind of got caught in a pocket from 2 out in the run into the straight. He also kind of had a penalty. He's kind of a highly talented flat horse himself, kind of rated in the low 90s. Joseph O'Brien saying afterwards he's probably going to go straight to Cheltenham, but he's been a bit busy. He was kind of running at Listowel and places like that. So I actually think the two of those, both of them kind of be suited, but he kind of tested the Triumph is a properly run race, kind of on a stiff track over an extended 2 miles. And while there are these other kind of, you know, horses with loads and loads of potential, I think they've already been there and done it and built up a decent amount of experience. It sets a good level for that race.
Okay, couple of suggestions. I like that. A bigger prices as well. Of course, Burdett Road, who missed the finale hurdle, is still your market leader for the Triumph, up 4-1 with BOYLESPORTS currently. Barry, I'm going to skip you about the Triumph hurdlers, and I'm going to come to you. Just a quick mention about Nassalam, obviously completely different division, winning the Welsh National so impressively, but has got a massive hike in the weight since. National dreams might be out the window, but this performance itself was, I mean, it was a slog all right, but he made it look positively easy.
Yeah, I think it was a slog for everything bar Nassalam. 34 lengths, like you'd never see that. And as a 6-year-old, so he's now raising 7 obviously, but that was a brilliant performance. Good winner of the trial for this race, but he was a good winner. He was nothing like this. But yeah, the handicapper got a good look at him last week. So, but a brilliant performance. Interesting to see what he can do. But I suppose if you had, you know, some of the Gold Cup contenders in off a similar weight, and here you'd expect this kind of performance. So maybe he comes in with a chance in a Gold Cup, but it's another step for him to get to that level. But Gary Moore's horses are flying. He's having a brilliant season, and it was a great result for him. And Caelan Quinn, who rode him, gave him a brilliant ride through the race. Jumped great, travelled nicely, committed him at the last. He wasn't afraid at the big stage. So many could have sat up and done the wrong thing, but he just kept him rolling and kept doing what he'd done the whole way through the race.
Yeah, Caelan Quinn really sort of feel like this is his big season, or it feels like it's developing into that. And Tony, last, I'm just rattling through these now because I got so told off for this, the duration of this show, I mean. But quick mention to you, Tony, because you were in our preview show for Christmas. Your advice was to basically pick anything other than Captain Guinness in that 2-mile chase at Leopardstown, the rewards club, isn't it? And that came to fruition. He flopped, and Dino Blue managed to pick up the pieces from Gentleman to Me.
Well, I don't know if I'd be taking any credit from flopping. He just didn't turn up. He kind of made a mistake. Just really a terrible run from I think he made a mistake. Middle one down the back, and just his race was over at that stage. Dino Blue kind of continuing her kind of progression up the ranks. I think you're a brave person to say now when she started out chasing last season that she'd be winning an open Grade 1 chase. Now maybe weakened a bit with the favourite on the performance, still a really good effort from her. The second Gentleman to Me, he's one that tends to be better in the spring, but a little bit of a tricky lad. A lot of his best performances are left-handed, but then he kind of jumps right the whole way through this race. So that's a weird one. Maybe he'll get a little bit closer to her at the Dublin Racing Festival, presuming that El Fabiolo goes to Ascot and bypasses that meeting altogether. But probably a substandard Grade 1, but you couldn't but like the progression that the mare has shown.
Yeah, I, like you, wouldn't have expected her to be scooping a Grade 1 in open company. But she's done that, and done it pretty nicely in the end. Right, that about wraps up our rattle through of the Christmas racing. We're very aware that obviously there's plenty of horses we haven't yet mentioned, but as I said earlier, we'd be here all night if we did. Quite enough time of it now to look ahead to this coming weekend. And we've got action at Plumpton on the Sunday with the Sussex National, and on the Saturday, main focus will be Sandown for us here in the UK. Barry, has anything just at this early stage jumped out of the page at you for us to look forward to this weekend?
Well, I think you wear it well in the mare's list. She will be hard to beat, stepping back up to 2.5 well, back in with her own sex as well. So I'd imagine she'd be a short price, but hard to beat. Nurse Susan is one who's on the up and worth considering as well. And Goodbye Bobby, who's having a brilliant season. He's won his 2 so far, really impressively. He's won at Sandown on soft ground, beating the Rasher counter last time. He's only got up £4 for that, so probably 2 well worth keeping an eye on. And in the Sussex National, I thought Wick Green, who was 5 lengths behind the Gavin Cromwell train horse in Cheltenham in his previous start, and was only beaten about 12 lengths by Late Night Pass in the cross country. I thought the Cheltenham run behind Highcure Claremont, I think it is, I thought that was the strongest level of form in the race.
Okay, couple of suggestions there then for our listeners and viewers out there. And final line to you, Tony, because we had Nace over in Ireland, Lawlers, novices over there, a grade 1 contest. That'll be the focus in Ireland. Again, same question. Anything at this early stage that you are looking forward to seeing?
Yeah, largely mundane action in Ireland next weekend, but that will be a very good race. I presume it will probably settle down to a rematch between Firefox and Eel Atlantic from the bumper they met at Fairy House last Easter. Wouldn't like to call it at the minute. I'll have to sit down and have a proper dig through. Both of them have strong maiden hurdle form that worked out, like Firefox with Ballyburn boosting over Christmas, and a lot of the horses that were beaten a hell of a long way behind Eel Atlantic and Goran, like No Time to Wait and Duke There's Glory and that have come out and run well since. So yeah, we'll have to look at the prices and see how that breaks down.
Okay, interesting little weekend ahead, but definitely not the flurry of activity we've had over the Christmas period. Tracker time, guys. Just one line from you with your tracker horses, please. Good little run of it for Barry with your tracker horse. Meeting of the Waters won the big handicap chase on the 27th, wasn't it, at Leopardstown for the Mullins team. So that was another one for the tracker horses. So no pressure here. Who is your tracker horse, please?
James de Burlay. He didn't live up to expectations last season after coming from France, but he put up a good show in the Paddy Power chase at Leopardstown. Finished fourth in the end, jumped really well, travelled strongly, first run with a tongue tie. Just thought this fella could be maybe possibly a national contender down the line, but I thought it was a good run and something he could build on.
Okay, James de Burlay for you then, and Tony, your tracker horse, please. Plenty to pick from.
Yeah, an awful lot to pick from. I'm going to go with Lieber Nick, who was down the field in the first maiden hurdle at Leopardstown on the 26th. Kind of had a well-fancied stablemate. Henry de Brom had trained Chris Jones' runner, but this horse was effectively having his first start. He'd run it in Navan a few weeks previous, but he'd been brought down in one of the early flights. I think his jumping wasn't all that fluent here under Adrian Heskin, possibly a result of that bad experience at Navan, and he made a kind of a mistake at the second last that really should have ended his chances, but he absolutely flew home from 2 out, and he actually, I bet I just have a little go of time in this. He was actually quicker over the distance from 2 out to the line than the winner, which was that Eddie O'Grady horse, the no flies on him. So that was fairly impressive. I think I'd say the speed test didn't really suit him. I just think stepping up and trip might be his job up to 2.5 now. And look, anyone who knows the kind of backstory of these colours, kind of formed after a tragedy for students, Irish students out in the west coast of America, there would only love to see them with a half decent horse, and this horse may well be it. He certainly looks up to winning races.
Right, well, fingers crossed then on lots of levels. That wraps up the show, guys. Thank you so much, Barry and Tony. It's a joy to talk about good racing with good people, and hopefully listeners and viewers out there have enjoyed the show as much as I have enjoyed recording it. Obviously, it's a Happy New Year from us, the At The Races digital team, BOYLESPORTS as well. That was our first episode of Off The Fence for 2024. We have so much more coming your way, but for now, thank you very much for watching. We will be back next Monday with more, but for now, have a good week. That was Off The Fence.